Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our viewers today. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Transforming Enterprise Data Protection, 5 Keys to Success with CloudIn and Veritas. Joining us today are Dan O'Farrell, Senior Director, Solutions Marketing at Veritas, and Sanjay Jagged, Senior Director of Products and Solutions at CloudIn. Welcome.
Thank you, Laura. Really excited to talk about some of the most pressing need right now in the industry. How do I protect and transform my data protection? The first thing that comes to mind is this unprecedented growth in the data, right? The popularity of rich media, the proliferation of the mobile devices, the digitization of the content. There has been this exponential growth in the amount of unstructured data that the IT has to manage. And this unprecedented growth is simply not sustainable by the current infrastructures or these solutions. And whenever you talk about a management area environment or an IT environment, whenever you start looking at scale, it just further creates more complications, because now not only just that you have to buy more equipment to manage and store your data, but you're now looking at more staffing, more real estate, the silos that are created. How do I make sure that I manage across that? And that is a big challenge when it comes to storing and protecting and then making that data usable.
Real quick comment.
Go ahead, Dan.
This last one. Dan here, everyone. The obvious from that diagram, the obvious impact is on your storage. And there's this kind of, as Sanjay talked about, this steep hockey stick. So what we're noticing at Veritas is that not only are you looking to figure out a way to more intelligently manage your data, but a lot of organizations are just trying to figure out how to identify what's what, right? So insight, the ability to characterize the data, can then lead you toward smart management and smart storage. And Sanjay, I know you're going to talk a little bit more about that relative to things like object storage. Yep.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely hit the nail on the head, right? It's just storing and managing that data is one thing, Dan, but getting insights into data is also a next big thing, right? Because you want to put that data to use, right? You want to monetize the data, and that's basically leads to what you're saying, and that leads to the third challenge that we see in the industry, right, Dan, is people are looking to see how can I leverage cloud, right? Cloud has become a viable alternative for a lot of those people when it comes to cold archives or moving data or trying to take advantage of the cloud in some way or the other to either get insights into the data or to have a copy of their data stored somewhere that can be accessible as and when needed. Right, Dan, you can shed some highlight into this particular stats that you have in this slide. But the main thing is the options are now plentiful, right? You have this multiple location on-prems, you have this multiple cloud options. The IT and the CIOs are looking to mandate their IT teams to say, hey, go figure out how are we going to leverage cloud? And that brings in another challenge, the cloud lock-in. How am I going to make sure that which cloud is good for me?
Yeah. In fact, what we're noticing at Veritas is that a lot of our customers, especially the large enterprises, they're spreading their bets across multiple clouds. So most IT directors, they are being given a task, which is to leverage the cloud. What that means exactly, however, varies from company to company. Does that mean you use the cloud as a storage target for secondary data? Does that mean you run workloads in the cloud? Does that mean you maybe run specific types of workloads in specific clouds? For example, you might look at Azure for your Office 365, but you might want to look at AWS or the Google Cloud for other workloads. So we're seeing a very broad mix here. No one size fits all, but we're noticing that larger enterprises are actually creating subscription deals with multiple clouds to avoid, kind of that single source scenario.
This is like a hot button item right now, right? You see all these news items, and people think about data and protection of the data as it's not just about ransomware or about just making sure that the criminals are protect against the criminals. It's also about how do I make sure that my data is protected against the compliance pieces and like all the different aspects that are needed to ensure that the data stays safe, it aligns and meets the compliance, be it GDPR, be it any of the other regulatory compliances that people have.
Yeah, certainly, when it comes to compliance, we see HIPAA in healthcare, PCI in retail, the GDPR, driven mostly by European activities, but any company that does business, certainly the global organizations undoubtedly do business in Europe. They have to comply with that as well. And the big thing here is to try to avoid those fines and penalties when it comes to compliance. And for security overall, companies want to avoid being the wrong type of headline in the news, right? So, and we, typically, that's what you hear about all the time. This breach, right, happened here and there. So, data protection in the form of keeping your data in a place where it's safely kept in case something happens is one part of this whole equation. But a thorough enterprise-wide security strategy also involves things like classic antivirus, edge protection. A lot of companies now are deploying machine learning-based, AI-based types of mechanisms to look at pattern matching on ingress and all that kind of thing. So the protection that we're talking about here with your storage and your backup is just one part of the whole equation, and that's the focus for today for this discussion anyway.
Absolutely, and we'll talk a little bit more about how the Veritas Cloudian solution addresses some of these challenges. But these are some great points to keep in mind when you start looking at transforming your enterprise data protection. And the last thing in terms of challenges, and this is, and I say last, but this is I think this most crucial piece we talked about, right? We talked about managing the scale, managing different silos, managing different cloud. How do I simplify the data management across my on-prem and in the cloud, right? This new requirements create new challenges. Like, you want to get insight into your data visibility, right? What kind of data is there so that you can monetize it, you can protect it more effectively, you can do custom policies based on the type of data and how you want to protect it, right? You want to optimize the recovery of that data. So there are different aspects when it comes to data management, right? And you have some good stats out here, Dan. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what we've seen happen is a lot of companies will use their backup and recovery environment as a basis for data protection, because any kind of a critical workload that's running in your organization, step one toward protecting it is to back it up, and then to be able to recover it in the case of any kind of compromise, any type of disaster, et cetera. So the data protection at the top right is your basic backup and recovery, but we view there are 5 other essential elements toward real data management. The data portability just involves moving the data at will from on-premises to a cloud, or between clouds, or between sites within an organization. Companies are looking to optimize their storage, because when Sanjay was talking earlier about that, the crazy growth of data, companies need to find a way to do that in an efficient manner. And oftentimes that involves analyzing and characterizing the data and not storing what you don't need to. The biz continuity is just all about resiliency and disaster recovery, and making sure that your services and your applications can recover quickly should some type of disruption occur. We already talked about the compliance, and it all kind of starts with the visibility. Once you know what you have, you can make much smarter choices in terms of what to do with it. And we've discovered at Veritas that in most enterprises, at least 70% of all the data is what you call rot, right? Obsolete, redundant, or trivial. So if you can characterize that and find it, you can save an awful lot on your storage costs because you don't have to bother with that stuff. So yeah, a lot of this, kind of contributes to that statistic, but the 30% of organizations are going to leverage backup. It's just a kind of a natural spot in which to kind of, do all this data management stuff.
The great points. And I want to emphasize one thing, Dan, is the data portability, right? People underestimate the impact that it has when you're talking about this different silos and different clouds. And how do I make sure that I'm not getting locked into some proprietary format? So the portability of data is really, really very important, especially when you're talking about recoverability and being able to access it from anywhere you want. So great points. So we talked about the 5 challenges, right? So let's talk about what does the success really look like, right? So challenges are great. You talk about the problems. Now, what is the best way to go about solving those or addressing those challenges? And the first key to addressing this is to centralize in a way that you can now, through policies, automate where you want your data, which data you need to be protected, and you can implement this from an end-to-end perspective, right? You can define your RPOs and RTOs. You can define your data movement scenarios, where you want, what data you want, and to protect, but not just protect it by creating copies. Yeah, there are new modern techniques of protecting this data so that you can make sure your data is available and is accessible and is recoverable in case of sustaining an entire data center failures like erasure coding, replication, and then cloud, right? And so you want to do this in a granular level, in a centralized way, through policies, in a fully automated way. Dan?
Yeah, and the key word I think here is automation, and our mechanism for creating that automation is a published API to allow multiple kind of management platforms or trouble ticketing platforms to be able to communicate, if you will, between consoles, between different platforms. For example, the CloudIn platform and the platform that we use at Veritas for insight and control. That API enables all types of integration and automation of processes based on policy between those. So and that model can be extended to any kind of readily available platform, whether it's something out there that's publicly well known, like maybe a Remedy or something like that, or even if it's developed in-house, you just program to that API and you've got that level of automation.
That's absolutely true. We are living in this new age of IT where the offerings and the storage offerings and the infrastructure offerings are all API driven. So that's a great point, Dan. Talking about APIs, the next big thing then is, once you have this automation, is simplification and management aspect of it, right? Especially, I keep telling this again and again, is when you have multiple sites and multiple locations, and you are now looking at multiple cloud offering, right? You want something that is very easy to manage, right? You don't want to manage each of these silos separately, and then your IT team having to learn each of this, and terminologies are different. And now, how do I make sense in making sure that when I define and automate a policy on one side, that it applies exactly on the other side? So you're looking at something that offers a simplified universal data management plane. And this can be broken down into 2 things, right? From a storage perspective, you want to make sure, very much like what the virtualization guys did, irrespective of where your storage resources are, be it in the cloud, be it on-prem, right? I can manage those storage resources through a centralized management plane, and having a global data namespace across all those locations, and can easily view, control, right? The challenges that you see in this cloud world today and when especially comes to data protection, is all this shadow IT functions, right? You have all these developers and engineers and other groups. They basically want to start off doing something quick, fast in the cloud, and they put up their data out there in the public. And how do you protect against that? And that's where you need a universal data management plane from a storage perspective that can then allow you to get insights into where your data is, can control where you move your data from on-prem in the cloud, and be able to recover those things in a very streamlined way, right? And this is where the metadata piece comes into the picture. And we'll go a little bit more into the metadata piece, but simplified management, Dan, is a key piece of the story and the solution, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a key point you make, and one of these bullets here is, you've got point solutions, point storage solutions evolve over time. Most companies, like anything else, it's an evolution. So you'll have pockets of storage of different types that talk different protocols. And normally once something is installed, it doesn't necessarily ever go away. I mean, people have been talking about getting off tapes forever, and there's plenty of tape still out there. So if there's a way to kind of gain insight and have a unified way to kind of manage all your storage, that's key.
Absolutely. And then we talk about the flexibility, right? You need something that adapts to the changes that you are seeing happening in the IT industry, right? Be moving from this proprietary technologies to a more software-defined cloud-like technologies, where you're talking about the hardware platforms that basically outgrow their life, and the newer platform comes in. How flexible are my data protection options, where I can bring in these newer platforms, can bring in this newer solutions without having to change the workflows, right? You want your protections to be set at the application level. You want to be able to do this at the data level, where you define the SLAs, where you define the SLOs without having to worry about how the underlying infrastructure impacts it, right? So I can enable my business continuity without creating any gaps, and be able to recover the data irrespective of where and how the data is of the IT infrastructure is evolving.
Yeah, and what I would add to this, Sanjay, is really nothing more to what's already on the slide, but one thing that a lot of our customers ask for is, once you set this up and you have kind of a disaster recovery model in mind, they want to be able to do a rehearsal, right? Because you set all these policies, you want to be able to rehearse it just to kind of see what's going to happen and how it's going to work. So not only do you want to have the ability to set this up based on, as you said, applications and organizations, et cetera, but the ability to rehearse it to see what's going to happen and whether or not you'll actually honor recovery time, recovering point objectives is really critical to be able to do that without impacting your business, right? So that's something that we see is oftentimes a requirement.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And right, not all data is the same. So you want something that is flexible to make sure that you are putting the right emphasis in terms of protection and security for the set of data that needs to be very highly valuable versus something that you would just have to store for some reasons, right? So having that flexibility is very important. And we talked about security, and protecting your data. Encryption is just one component of it, right? The way to create copies so that you can have versions of data available in case of ransomware, so that you can easily recover from that is another aspect of it. But then there's more to it, Dan.
Yeah, and I've already touched on this one, so I think we already covered this. But it is important, I think, the background chatter going on within your infrastructure. You want to make sure that that's extremely secure, right? The node-to-node type of communication that goes on. And then, we talked about all these elements that go into a complete kind of, anti-malware, protection system from end to end. It includes a lot of technologies, and our focus for today is more on the storage and backup and recovery aspects.
Absolutely. And the last thing when it comes to success is you want a solution that is scalable, right? Because as we talked about earlier, right, your data is gonna go, and it's proven it's gonna grow at a rate that is far outpacing the way you're used to buying or incorporating newer infrastructures. So you want something that seamlessly scales, wherein you can add nodes, you can add data centers while maintaining your workflows, while maintaining that access from an application perspective. It's a single architecture. You can, if you want to add another site or a cloud, you should be able to seamlessly scale in a limitless way. That is a key piece out here, right? You want to make sure that you're not looking at re-architecting solutions, but growing your infrastructure with your data.
Yeah, in fact, when we talk about scale, there's two dimensions, right? There's scale up, which is just add more capacity, right? And plan and grow for that. And then there's what we call scale out, which is becoming very commonplace, especially with big data workloads, like Hadoop or hyperconverged with the likes of Nutanix and some of those guys, where the scaling is done simply by adding another node, so that you can scale hopefully in lockstep with your spend, because companies are trying to get away from overspending or underspending and having unhappy users. So you want to look for a solution that can not only scale massively with raw volume, which we see all the time in the Global 500, but when people are starting to implement some of these newer modern workloads, you want to be able to have an architecture that can scale out with those workloads, the way those things get built out too. So scaling up and scaling out, being able to handle both is really important.
Great stuff. So we talked about the challenges, we talked about what the success should look like, and now we want to talk a little bit about how do I modernize. So we'll give you a little bit insight into the technologies, the CloudIn, the Veritas, and then we'll jump into the solution. So let's quickly talk about what we have to offer. So for people who don't know what is CloudIn, CloudIn provides an enterprise-grade storage solution for your on-premise private clouds, but the ability to do hybrid and multi-cloud, right? It's the only solution out there in the market right now that offers the S3 compatibility that allows you to seamlessly take advantage of the emerging ecosystem around the Amazon ecosystem, but it also has the ability to support your traditional application workloads, which are used to speaking traditional file protocols, be it NFS, SMB, or SIPs. Right? It can be bought as an appliance, or you can buy it as a software that can run. So it's a software-defined solution that can allow you to start small and then scale to hundreds and hundreds of petabytes. Right? We see this very ideal in terms of use cases around media archives. We talk about emails and messaging, big data. We also find a lot of customers using our boxes and our solutions for offloading some of the traditional NAS devices, where you basically have huge amount of data that has not been touched for years, right? And you still are end up paying tier 1 NAS storage pricing for that. But the emerging use cases that we see is around video surveillance, right? The bioinformatics, the sensor data, the healthcare medical imaging, the vendor neutral archives, and all the media archives, as we talked about. This is where the capacity is being pushed, and this plays to the strength of what CloudIn solution and architecture has to offer, which is a very seamless, limitlessly scalable object storage solution, right? So talking about scalability, we talk about the ability to scale from a few hundreds of terabytes in this particular case, I'm showing you one of our dense for you boxes that basically can, each for you box can support up to 840 terabytes, and then how we can scale this by simply adding more nodes in a non-disruptive way. You can now add more nodes, you can add more data centers, and still maintain that same global namespace. Adding nodes means you can now not only just scale the capacity, but also scale the performance, right? You can with 40 gig and 100 gig NICs, you can now get line speed when it comes to the ability to ingest and output the data. So that is a key piece when you're talking about huge amount of quantities of data that you want to back up and recover, right? These, as you add these nodes, you're still maintaining the same simplified management where we often see our customers have a single FTE that manages multiple petabytes across different locations. It's as simple as going through a cloud portal and being able to manage your entire storage infrastructure in a very seamless way that gives you a view into your data, ability to now search for your data, irrespective of where it is, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. It gives you full visibility and then gives you granular options in terms of how you want your data to be moved and protected, right, at the bucket level. So all those aspects, that's what makes it an enterprise solution that has been widely used when it comes to data protection. Some of the key features, and again, I'm going to just run through this quickly. As I mentioned earlier, right, we talk about S3 being the de facto standard when it comes to object storage. We run S3 APIs natively that allows us to deliver on the performance that we talk about, right? And our architecture leverages the S3 APIs that allow us to scale rather than having an S3 converter. It allows you to do things like multi-tenancy QoS and then still support the needs for getting granular visibility into usage, right? And a lot of our service provider customers have built data protection and backup solutions on CloudIn, which they basically offer as a service to their end customers. We are the only platform that allows you to, as I said, in a granular level, be able to customize your data protection, be it replication, erasure coding at a bucket level, and then be able to seamlessly integrate into the cloud of your choice, right? Be it Azure, be it Google, be it AWS, right? And to do this in a way that can scale, can access and support my traditional applications, which are file-based application, is really valuable to the customers who want to continue to maintain their existing workflows. And the last piece is when you talk about enterprise infrastructures, you're talking about ability to do smart support, right? The ability to get insights and proactive support messages and alerts that allow you to keep maintaining your infrastructure in an operational state, in a very healthy state, without having to have the worry about how am I going to manage these large infrastructures. And the last piece, which we're going to talk a little bit more in our solution, is the metadata. Unlike traditional storage, object storage offers rich metadata, which can be further enhanced using AI machine learning. So you can categorize the data that is getting stored and then can use that extra metadata to categorize and define your custom storage policies and data protection policies so that you know what data you want to protect and how you want to protect, and you can easily recover based on some keywords. With that, I'll say, let's talk a little bit more about the Veritas component of it. Dan?
Okay, great. And this will be a very, very quick summary. I'm not going to go into too much detail. The fact is that NetBackup is running in the world's biggest, most demanding IT environments on the planet. massively scalable, high performance, which is why I think CloudIn and Veritas have partnered for quite some time now, because we're both all about performance and scalability. And as a result, it's designed for that, and it serves as kind of the foundation for what we call a comprehensive data management model. So you've got backup and recovery for basically just about any kind of database that's out there, including the new open source type databases. What we're noticing is a lot of our customers now are looking to back up and protect open source, big data, hyperconverged, in addition to kind of the classic Oracle and DB2 type databases that run in enterprises. But the whole point here is having a unified platform that negates the need for point solutions and accepts point solutions that are already embedded, so nothing has to be lifted out, and allows you to take advantage of the cloud as it makes sense to you. Obviously, you can back up virtual machines. You can administer this very easy from a common console. And then the top row there, InfoMap, VRP, and Velocity, are other elements that you can actually order with NetBackup if you want to add insight and characterization of your data to know what you actually have out there, resiliency to keep your apps up and running even in the event of a disaster, and then copy data management to make sure you don't get copy sprawl, and to allow you to make sure you comply with mandates that have to do with storing and maintaining copies of key documents. So it's a foundation for what we call 360 data management, and that's the platform itself. Next. And I already mentioned this. So it's a unified platform, physical, virtual, cloud workloads. Doesn't matter where it's running. We have key relationships. And by the way, what Gartner is saying is that most cloud implementations are going to be for workloads, not necessarily data. I think most organizations will probably end up continuing to store critical data on premises, but what is moving to the cloud is a lot of workloads, and that'll probably continue to happen. But the whole idea is to efficiently protect, backup, and recover no matter where the data is or what type of workload it is, and using a full range of technology, including the CloudIn Object Store platform, which fits in really well in these highly scalable, demanding environments. Next slide. One thing that we are really, we've been doing for literally over a decade is backing up virtual machines. So whether it's Hyper-V or VMware ESXi or a hyperconverged infrastructure with Nutanix, we've got a lot of experience in managing VMs, again, in giant enterprises as well as in smaller type companies. But it's as easy as a plug-in and you're off and running. And we've got a report that we've shared in the past that shows the relative performance gain that you get in terms of your ability to back up and then quickly recover massive amounts of data, in this case, VMs. Next slide. I will not go through all this detail. You'll be able to replay this and spend more time looking at this. The latest version of NetBackup, the biggest thing that we did was on the left side. We have a RESTful API now that allows NetBackup, allows organizations to automate their data protection function. And as we heard from Sanjay, CloudIn also has an API, so you can now integrate these capabilities from both platforms onto a common platform if you wish, or develop it yourself, whatever your preference is. So we've now extended the ecosystem to organizations that are looking to automate the process from a standard platform. The rest you can read later on. I would say that these modern workloads, under the modern scale-out workloads, we now support full backup and recovery for Hadoop and big data, Nutanix, Hyperconverged, MySQL, Postgres, MariaDB, SQLite, a lot of these open source type databases. And the nice thing about that is it's through a plug-in model that is agentless. So if you've got a new workload that you're looking to make sure you can back up and recover, all you have to do is download the plugin and you're off and running. You don't have to wait for a new version of software from Veritas or anything like that. So a lot in there. We've been innovating a lot, and typically we have releases like this roughly every 4 months that are feature rich and just add more to the platform. And that summarizes that.
Summary, right? So I think the biggest thing out here, Dan, is like, if you look at the value props of CloudIn, look at the value props of Veritas, they basically bring in the same viewpoint when it comes to data protection, and that's what makes this partnership and the solution very unique. It gets in the best in terms of best in class in the industry, where now you have a solution that share that similar concept and the view of where the data is going and how to simplify the data protection, be it from the way we make that individual components integrate together in a very seamless way through APIs and the integration and the testing we have. To the giant customers that are using this solution, it's a proven solution that is easy to start off. You can basically have CloudIn be part of the Veritas ecosystem. When Dan was talking about how it fits into existing storage solutions that you may have, to make sure that you have a target that is feature rich, that can store, protect, and secure your data through earlier in the slide. So we'll go a little bit into the details of the solution, but this is a match that basically combines the two solutions and gives you a best-in-class industry solution that allows you to protect your data. So let's talk about the use cases, right? How does it make it simple, right? So one of the primary use case is very simple. Like, Dan, you mentioned this, protecting VMs, right? Protecting hyperconverged infrastructures or any other databases. And you can set up that policies through the Veritas NetBackup and then be able to recover through that. And that same policy driven is then transformed into a CloudIn infrastructure, which basically can now make that data available not only in their existing on-prem solutions, but can also be then via policies within CloudIn be able to tier some of this data into the cloud of your choice. And now you can see from this high-level block diagram, it now gives you a simple way to manage that whole ecosystem right from the application down all the way into the cloud, and then be able to recover that data in a very seamless way. So this is a very high-level block diagram, which basically gives you how easy it is to be able to deploy a solution and be able to overcome all your challenges and be able to bring in an enterprise-class data protection solution. The use case that we talked about oftentimes in this particular case is not only just backing up your primary data, but as Dan, you mentioned, that a lot of these workloads are going to be in the cloud. You want a solution that can scale when you start looking at more data that needs to be backed up, or more applications and the ecosystem that needs to be backed up. So the solution not only just has to work, but it has to be able to scale to meet the demands of the workloads, meet the demands of the exponential data growth, and to be able to still preserve that workflows as you scale through either components, right, to meet that needs that customers are looking for.
Yeah, and I'll just comment again on the scale out. Both platforms in this case are well designed to accommodate that phenomenon, especially with the growth of big data, where the scale out is really what's pushing the envelope. So with the scalability and the capacity and the intelligence of the CloudIn solution, coupled with the technology that we deploy within Veritas, we call it parallel streaming, that allows you to very efficiently accommodate these growing scale-out workloads, is really critical. And this is a great kind of a pairing right here to make sure that you can do that in a cost-effective manner. Pay for it when you need it, but not before or after.
Great point. And the other piece to data protection is the ability to do DR, business continuity, not only just to make sure that the data is available in case of your DR scenarios, but to able to quickly make sure that you test through these policies, DR scenarios, and be able to DR policies that you have, the business continuity policies that you have are aligned with your business goals, right? The key part, if you look at the solution out here, again, the flexibility component comes in out here, the flexibility from a CloudIn perspective to be able to, when deploy this cluster, that can be spread across multiple sites, right? So even though it presents itself as a single big cluster with a single namespace, most of our customers tend to have this cluster split out wide enough in between multiple sites, and then through policies be able to say that data is available between those two data centers, be it erasure coding, be it replication. And what this means is you're moving away from the failure paradigms, which are basically on a node level or on a drive level, to now talk about data center failures and still be able to recover instantaneously. So now reducing your RTOs and then be able to have a greater RPOs when it comes to be able to access that data. Once the data, think about this cluster that basically now can also bring in the cloud component, right? So now you have an ability to move that data into the cloud and be able to recover data. And this is where the flexibility on the Veritas side, once the data is available on the other side, you can then deploy the Veritas solution and be able to still take advantage of all the automation and then be able to quickly access the data as and when needed on either side of the solution.
Yeah, nothing more to add from me. You just said it all, Sanjay.
Fantastic. It's always good when the partners and the solution that it's in complete alignment, and that's the value that we bring when it comes to the integrated CloudIn, Veritas, NetBackup data protection solutions, right? It's a proven solution. It's a solution that is widely accepted by our install base, our customers. They like the technologies and what individual components have to bring to the table and how it makes their life easy. So at this point, we'll open it up for any other questions that we may have. But it was, I hope you really got insights. And if you have any more questions, or if you would like to get more details or would love to know more about the solution, feel free to reach out.